friends, this is Dr. T here, and I welcome you this morning. I've got a very special person here to interview. She is a doctor, educational psychologist based in the UK. She's going to introduce herself and tell us how she landed in the UK. Let me welcome Dr. Cleopatra Chambati. Doc, welcome, and please give a brief background by introducing yourself, where you come from, where you qualified, and what category you qualified in. Doc, over to you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. T. I am Dr. Cleo Chambati, currently based in the United Kingdom, working and residing there. But I am originally from Zimbabwe. That's where I was born. Started off my early education, that is both primary and secondary, as well as go on to tertiary education. I have a teaching background. Initially, that's how I pursued and envisioned that I was going to be a teacher. As time went on, I pursued my studies and I did a first or basic degree in psychology while still in Zimbabwe. And then I moved on to South Africa, where I worked as a teacher, volunteered in some schools. As I got to understand the education system, I decided that it was time, or perhaps the profession and the journey chose me to become more in the educational psychology field. I think it was basically the interest of understanding more about children and understanding what else that I could do to get a deeper meaning of their learning and enable them, that led me to the University of Pretoria, where I studied my honors in psychology, proceeded to do my master's in psychology, and then finally proceeded to do my postgraduate education in psychology studies. So in a nutshell, I would say that's the journey that I took that led me to the title and the work that I have.
Exciting, exciting. Good to hear. And just for clarity, so you did your M here and then you registered with the Health Professions Council in South Africa.
Yes, correct.
Did you work in South Africa after you completed? And how long did you work before you relocated to the UK?
In South Africa, I worked almost about 3 years. Basically, what happened was initially, soon after completing my master's, or prior to completing my master's, I was working within an international school. So I was already working under or within the field of education, supporting children with special needs. So I was already making use of my honors degree and the experience that I had attained and was attaining in my master's to support children with needs. However, upon completion of my master's, I then went on to my internship, and I worked for a center that operated within central schools in Pretoria to support educational and learning well-being of children. So that's how I managed to do my internship. So my internship was done across schools for a year. And then from there on, I went on to work in a high school in Centurion, where I specifically focused on the therapeutic aspect of supporting students and also providing counseling, which was quite significant in enabling me to make use of most of what we had trained through our master's year in terms of supporting young people, enabling them through different kinds of difficulties and challenges to cope within an educational setting and resolve their own challenges or resolve their own aspects of things that they may have crisis or find challenging at certain phases of their lives. So that really provided me with some or fundamental experience that prepared me for working a year in the United Kingdom.
Wow, 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 wow. That sounds like a very good experience. But before we get to the relocation, there's an issue
Yes.
that I come across a lot of
Mm,
students who are not selected for masters. In educational psychology in particular, you also have to go through selection for honors level. I just want to
mm,
check with you because I'm not quite sure when you arrive in SA, didn't you have
mm.
challenges in terms of selection to honors and masters? Just to share a bit about those experiences, the transition from an undergraduate to honors and to masters. How was it? And how was your experience? Have you been rejected? Was it a once off? How was the process? Just that selection process. And maybe at the end, just to give advice to those who might not be selected, because you speak about you were working part-time or full-time while you were studying. How were you juggling the two? Because I think at psych, to some extent, the fact that you have got classes afternoon, it gives some form of flexibility. But I wonder if that was the case with you. I know during our time, I think the classes were, all of them were after 2 or late in
Yes,
the after. So it was more
absolutely.
designed for people with a teaching background who go to school and have to
Yeah.
come back and attend. How was the experience?
I had quite an interesting experience. It was such a learning curve for me on a personal level as well as on a professional level, in the
Mm,
sense that initially in terms of selection, I must say I was quite privileged because I had a once-off selection. So every time that I made my initial application, I was quite privileged to be selected. And I know that it is not the
wow.
case for some other people. They go through the route differently. There were
Mm,
colleagues during those interviews that made indications that perhaps this was their fifth or their fourth
wow.
time.
Wow.
Um, so, like in any life story, the narrative differs for
Mm,
everyone.
mm,
I
mm,
think the most important when it comes to that, it's how determined are you in
mm,
terms of choosing or what is so important for you. So if it
mm,
means that you are that one person that has to go through it 4 or 5 times, that should not
mm,
hinder you from
mm,
pursuing that which you most desire. And for some of us that are fortunate enough to get through oneself, it also means another narrative of still pursuing and working harder and
mm,
knowing that there are others that want to go through the process as well. I
mm,
think that was for me and quite an eye opener through the selection
mm,
process, and that on its own at the time that we were having. I know this has since changed over time. It gave a sense of realizing that this journey was meant to be treated seriously, and it meant that there was quite a lot of things that I had to consider at the time. I was a mom with a child who was in his early years, around 4 or 5 years. What was important to me, other than just being a student, was to provide for my family. So in my case, it was paramount to work. However, in the dynamics of honors and masters, everybody was on a different journey. There are those that did not need to work because that they could afford, then they did not work. And there are those that did part-time work, and again, their narrative required them to do so. And in my case, I needed to work, and like other few people, I needed to work full-time. So I then took the journey where I was working full-time, and in a way, the system in terms of learning and and working, there was a perfect synchrony, but there was always need for adjustments and communicating with the workplace, that sometimes I need to leave early, and knowing that there was a negotiation process that would be needed through that process. Upon completion of my honor, so I was working as a teacher. So upon completion of my honors, and already then I had gone through the master's interview in my honors year. So I definitely knew I was going on to the master's course. And in the first year, I then chose not to work because my anticipation was that we were moving a level higher, so that needed me to have more focus, have more time on my hands in comparison to the honors year. And so I carefully then chose not to work. In my second year, then I went back to working. Again, the transition for me, again, the master's interviews themselves were an eye opener of the experience that I had gained, and I'm sure for other people, through the honors year. So there were some of us that proceeded to go through the masters, and there are some that were not able, so they joined other universities. Some went on to work straight away with their honors degree. You could work as a school counselor. Some people went on to do work in terms of learning support and working in some learning support / remedial schools. And with the honors degree, there's so much that you can already still do in terms of working. You can register as a school counselor. You can find work in certain schools and already start finding your role and what you would like to do. And practice. There are certain assessments as well that you can do at that level, that you are allowed to do. And again, because we have a credit or a course that is requires us to have additional learning. So with addition of other courses and learning that you can do, you can develop your craft. This is the experience that I noticed from my other colleagues that I was journeying with, and they stopped at different journeys or diverted their journeys as they went by. So as for me, I then proceeded to do my master's. Second year of my master's, I decided to get back to working because I felt that I could manage my capacity as a student, as well as manage to work, and on a financial measure as well. Financially, you need money as a student to survive. So you need to find out, do you have, because it does need careful planning. But I know for some of us, when a certain journey chooses you, you plan things as you go. There is no opportunity, and I know I speak for so many people in terms of finances. You don't have the time to do any pre-planning. It's not the reality of the masses. So you plan as you go. So for me, then it meant that for me to be able to continue with my studies, I needed as well to work. And that was quite beneficial. But also, in terms of the university itself, they do provide some funding, and that enables, but to pay for some things, but not fully pay for what a student requires to go through the course. So in a way, what the university was giving as postgraduate fund, as well as me working, complemented my survival through the course in terms of cost of living, cost of the course. And again, for me, it was the experience of going through different learning modules. And I think when I got to the master's level, I think there was deeper understanding of what different components were meant for, more on a I think at that point there was quite a lot of reflective thinking and realizing what is coming together, because as a student I think what comes clear is that, oh, there are these so many modules that we are doing, but what is significant is to realize the pattern that, oh, this module on community psychology, or in terms of a practical, in terms of inclusion or aspects of assessment, and how does it all combine and form these experiences or body of knowledge that you require to be the psychologist that you are meant to be. So that is when I started forming those patterns and understanding. And then the internship year sort of cements that and seals it, in terms of it gives you a deeper understanding of what you were being prepared for, because it seems fragmented, but at the same time, it nicely forms a pattern. And it is then quite clear that the university is giving you a basis to start your career, and that basis is very much enough to prepare you for what is to come. There will still be a lot of learning in terms of assessment, in terms of knowledge, in terms of other skills that you can, but the fundamental basis of what educational psychology is, what practice is, what assessment is, I really feel strongly than ever before that all those things that we learned through master's year, regardless of wherever you go, they still form that fundamental basis to learn a new assessment, a new way of administering a test, regardless of you have never seen it before or you have never made use of it. And also engagement with young people, families, in terms of supporting them to meet them at their points of needs.
No, thank you so much. I think that was very elaborate, and I'm glad that you also touch on the issue of juggling your studies and work, because I think most of the question that I get, particularly for people who are already in full-time employment, whether will they be able to work and study at the same time. And I think you touch well on that the consideration that one has to make based on their circumstances. But I think what I throw as well is that it is still possible that you can do your aim and be able to work at the same time. But obviously, you spoke about you need to do thorough calculations, and
Yes, absolutely.
yeah, because I mean, we know psychology is very demanding, so people might think it is impossible to work at all. And on your side, you were a teacher part time. I remember during my aim, I was working as a part time lecturer, and I was also a mentor, and I think I was a research assistant to the dean by then. But luckily, all my job were within the institute, so I didn't have to go out. So for me, it worked easier. I could manage. I could wake up in the morning, go to the university, and my work start. But with you, you were at the school, and you spoke about negotiating with your employer so that they can be able to release you. But maybe just lastly to touch on that, in the hindsight, when you look back, will you say you would have still made the same decision that you made in not working in first year and working in second year? Or perhaps you will not have considered work at all given the workload? Or it will always depend and you think it is still possible to manage? When you look back now, what will you perhaps maybe advise somebody in the same situation where they're weighing their options? Whether can they juggle the two? What will you say to that?
Uh, I I would still, had I known then, because sometimes when we make decisions, we do not realize their value until you have gone through the experience. Any advice that I would give a student that is in their master's year is work, even if you have the privilege not to work. One, you are harnessing experience. So I would advise those that have the privilege not to work to find perhaps any job that is related to the masters that they are doing, or that allows them to have some form of experience. Because what I then realized upon completion, I could indicate that those years of experience within a teaching job, within a learning setting, so that provided me with years of experience that is quite critical. As much as the theoretical knowledge is important, but also to have experience in hand, it enables you to relate that and already start saying or including in your portfolio that I've had experience to work within a learning environment, and these are the skills that I've gained in terms of working in a school, engaging with learners, engaging with other professionals within that setting. So it creates that portfolio of experience. So I would advise any masters, if they can, but at the same time being aware that our capacity to learn is different, and what we are able to do varies, like in as much as in our capacity to do so many things. So perhaps if learning is not for you, you are that one person that needs to focus on one thing at a time, then you do that which is most important to you. Because as much as I could be able to juggle work and studying, for another student it's not the same. So again, it's never too late then afterwards to make use then of your internship year and the years that to follow to gain experience. So in essence, it's not a one size fits all, but if possible, I would encourage anyone to work in their master's year. And as I go through and see, it is quite a luxury to be in a master's year, a postgraduate student level, and not to be doing some kind of work, or whether you're working at the university or you are working in other institutions or of work. It is a privilege, because the trend is that most postgraduate students work and study at the same time.
No, I totally agree, and I think you are right. I think experience adds a lot of value, because I usually tell people, even if you have worked part-time, by the time you
Yeah.
complete and they ask you years of experience, you'll be able to add whatever part-time work that you have done. But I think from a psychological perspective, for me, it also felt like a therapeutic process. Masters can be very stressing. If you are only focusing on it, you need something on the side to go there
Yeah,
and sort of, release your stress from there. And you need
absolutely.
something totally different. And it really, really
Yeah,
helps. But
yeah.
yes, let's move on, because I think the most exciting part that I don't want to miss out as part of this interview, I was chatting with you on WhatsApp, only to find out you are no longer walking the street of Pretoria anymore. You are walking the street of London. And I was interested to know how you managed the transition, what actually happened, when did you leave? And that's the part that I wanted us to focus on, because there are many people in SA or anywhere in the world who might want to come to UK. Wow, we love to come to UK. So just if you can just explain how that transition happened, just to take us through it. Obviously, I might have other questions, but just to take us through the process. I know you might not be able to share about exactly where you are working or the department, but at least we know it's a reputable department, it's a national department, and we leave it there. But just to share about how that transition happened from working, graduating in Pretoria at UP, and moving to the UK. Just take us, how did it happen? When did it happen?
Yes, in terms of my transition to the United Kingdom, I think it really emanated from me initially visiting the country. And at that point, I came to visit as a tourist in 2015 upon completion of my master's degree. And I visited for a few years, for a few days. And my thinking was that it was just going to end with me as a tourist. And at that point, I was not
You must also
really.
mention that it was a way to reward yourself after completing masters.
Yes, yes.
Because
It
I think
was
you
a
need to reward
way.
yourself after completing.
It was definitely a way to reward myself. And because the United Kingdom, I had some friends that were here already. So so it became an easy reward, because I had friends to visit. And it was such a rewarding process, because as soon as I completed, immediately I came for the holiday. And I
Wow.
think that was the turning point. Little did I know that I would then transition and come to settle here. But that was my window of opportunity, in terms of perhaps getting a snippet of what it feels like to be in the United Kingdom, to just understand the basic setup of the country. Um, but I must say, it is a different feeling when one is on holiday than when
I
one
can
is
imagine.
actually living
I
i-
can
i-
imagine.
in the country. So there was a huge difference, because as a tourist, you have you do not have the insights to the nitty gritties to a busy day at work within the UK. So that I was never prepared for. But in terms of the beauty of the country, the tourist places that were quite places of attraction, that sent out an invitation on their own. So then I came back again in 2017, and that's when the thought was that then fully planted, because some of my friends were social workers, and that's when the thought then sank in to say, and as conversations emanated, what is the practice like in the United Kingdom? And at that point, I then remembered how much of inclusivity in terms of UK being quite a number of years ahead of us, and how professionals work in as multi agencies in terms of supporting young people, children, and their families. So I was quite fascinated that if they
Wow.
are years ahead of us, how do their systems work? Is it any different uh, from what we how we practice? What does the practice of an educational psychologist look like? So I was very much interested, because I remember there were certain set books in our master's year that we had to buy, that were basically for South Africa, but not for UK. I don't know if you recall that.
Very well.
So which meant that there was a difference in practice. So I was keen to find out what is that which is different from. So that sparked that idea that I needed to explore working here. So then that's when I started doing my homework. What is it that I needed to do? So you can imagine, in 2017, I had not done anything. I just come for the visit. It was a 20-day visit. So when I returned, I had already found out, oh, they also have a professional board similar to the South African
HPCSA.
HCPSA,
Yes.
yes, that I needed to register to. And it was quite fundamental that I was registered with South Africa, because if you're registered with one board, it makes it easier for you to register with another board in another country. Yes, so it is fundamental. You never realize how much and why we register with the board, and until you start working across the borders. And then you realize, and I'm still fully registered with the HPCSA, because it is important that you remain registered. And
You're still paying the fees.
yes, I'm still
Wow.
paying the fees so that
Wow.
I maintain my registration. So in
Wow.
the event that I, for example, come through or to South Africa to do maybe volunteer work or something, I work on that basis of registration. Or
Wow.
I decide that I need to go back home, I use the same registration. If it is such a case that I have cancelled it, then I have to reapply and sit for board of exams. So you are continuously registered, continuously paying the registration fees. So because I was registered with the board in South Africa, that meant I had to then work on registering with the Health and Care Profession Council here in UK.
That's
So then I
equivalent to the HPCSA in South Africa.
Yes, absolutely. So they hold the same weight. Their bases in terms of our practice are exactly the same. They know that, again, they look at, are we gaining any because we are a credit-based service, we need to acquire skills as we learn. So they are the gatekeepers of that as well. So in essence, I then followed the route of registering as soon as I got back.
Wow.
because you can register whilst you're in another country and
Wow.
practicing. So
Wow.
I embarked on that, and the process took about, I think, if in estimation, it took about at most 4 months to for me to get my registration certificate with them and to get everything approved that I am registered to work as an educational psychologist in
Mhm.
the UK. So it's
Sorry.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. I want to get the clarity there. What does
yes,
it entail? What are the requirements? What did they ask you to submit? Maybe for somebody planning so that they can at least start to put documents together for you to
okay.
register with. Do you have to have a do you have to have a job first before you do that, or anybody can just do it before they apply for a job? Or how does it work? What was the process about?
As for me, because already in my master's year, I was gaining experience
Mm,
because I was working in schools. I was using my honors qualification to work with children with special needs. So
mm,
I had already in my portfolio experience, which
mm,
was related to my master's in terms of supporting children with needs.
mm,
Um, uh, conducting assessments through the internship year.
mm,
So that internship year is also a year of experience. So
mm,
in addition to it being a learning process, it is
mm,
also experience that you can highlight that I've had experience in working with schools, conducting assessment, working on a therapeutic basis, um, engaging in quite in a behavioral support, uh, all those aspects, all those sectors that we cover in terms of being an educational psychologist. So for me, um, it was that 1 year plus almost about 3 or 4, 5 years of working in the educational setting and also 10 years of experience as a teacher. So I had quite a, a detailed route of experience from teaching to working in another capacity as a learning
mm,
support officer, working closely with children with needs. So,
mm,
what the HPC board requires of you to do, when I did my homework, I realized, okay, I needed to go to their website,
mm,
and their website is quite user friendly. And then you need to then find specific forms of registering as an
mm,
international uh, individual or professional wanting to register with them. So the
mm,
forms on their own clearly specify what they want you to evidence. So, for example, they wanted me to evidence the information relating to my courses of study. So, the route
mm,
that I took in terms of becoming an educational psychologist, so evidencing my master's year, the modules that I had covered, the number of years that I had the duration of courses, the credit points that were indicated in every module. So
mm,
they have a certain number of documents that you need to complete. And found it some of the things that I never thought were important. For example, ensuring that you keep your modules, the study
mm,
guides.
mm,
It's very essential in future when you want to reference, they will come in handy. Just
mm,
knowing what in every module, what credit points, how many hours
mm,
um, were meant for that course. At the
mm,
point of study, I thought that that was going to end there. not realizing that there is a bigger picture of it all in terms of indicating my credentials and my credibility to and as an educational psychologist. So I found going back, digging back to say, oh, by the way, in terms of learning development, LDS, what did this mean in terms of credit points? How many hours did I
Sure.
do this? Yes. Oh, Ngilandi, as a project that I went to, what did it
Sure.
mean? What were the values? So all that I needed to evidence as components of what we studied, and and that's when you see the whole picture forming, and you realize the fundamental components of everything that you went through the course, and how it makes you the professional that you are. So once you have evidenced this, the university has forms that they also need to complete in terms of indicating the modules that you have done. Um, so it is again about having that open relationship again with the university, because chances are that you will go back and say you need support and guidance as you're going through that process, and you need support in terms of, for example, if you do not have the study guides, you may want to go back and get that from the university, and they also need to complete some of the forms on your behalf. So the university itself, and
Okay.
sign them as well as part of evidence that would be forwarded to the HCPC.
Wow.
So so I would say that process, it totally depends on really what you want. For me, it took me um 3 very hands-on days of gathering up documents that were essential. They have a certain way of telling you how they want those documents to be presented. Uh, how you certify them as well is very different and uniquely meant for that process. So a careful reading of what is required. So for documents that needed my part, that took a good 3 days, which I was very hands-on, and I worked till the very late hours in terms of completing and gathering up. It took more than a week and a half to gather parts of the documents that needed other people to evidence. So you need to have references of people, of other psychologists that had supervised you through
Wow.
the different aspects of training. So I had to go back to my internship supervisor, who gladly signed documentation, evidence the skills that I had gained, the different assessments that we had done. I went back to colleagues that I had worked with. I went back
Wow.
to institutions that I had worked with. So that's because it was beyond my control. It took
Wow.
a bit more of time to work on. Uh, but all that being said, it can be done, and it can quickly be done depending on how fast paced you work in gathering up that information. So the references were equally important, because it is, and within now what they will be now looking now, because it is registration for you to work as an educational psychologist. So these, mainly most of them need to be educational psychologists that have supervised you in your work of practice or within an educational setting, and evidencing the full range that you have worked across all the essential bits for one to practice as a as an educational psychologist was also quite important. And from there on, it takes about 30 working days for them to respond and indicate that
You
you
mean
are
to get
fully,
a feedback from the ministry that side, the board?
yes, to get feedback from the board. If you have left out some documentation, they will indicate that you have left out some information, and that can make the process longer. So the most important is that if one needs to register, they have to gather their information thoroughly, um, and to evidence fully, because for those that then assess the information, they will look into it as evidence by the individual. And if they feel that, well, you have not substantiated in other parts, they can tell you, well, you might need to do additional training in this,
Oh,
or you do not qualify in this. Uh, and that happens. So it's very important to fully evidence what you have done, because sometimes just errors by omission can cost you, and
mm.
you wonder what has happened. But so far, for people that I know that are my colleagues, most of their registration went through very well,
Mm.
without any concerns.
Okay. And tell me, by that time when we were doing this application, had
Mm.
you got a job then, or did it come after?
It came immediately. Well, immediately when I received the letter from the HCPC. So after you have after they have looked through your documentation, they send you an initial letter with your registration number. So the letter indicates that you are registered, and it is that specific number that is usually required when you are applying to practice or work here in UK. So when that registration number came through, I say for me it was the green light to start applying, uh, for different jobs. So I had not applied in the process. I felt that there was no need for me to apply at that point. But
Mm.
I think again, different narratives for different people. There are some people that go on to register whilst they are here. I personally find that that takes longer, because then you are not working in your capacity as a psychologist, because
Mm.
you're not fully registered. So that delays your
Okay.
capacity to work. So
Mm.
it was just easier that I went the route of registering.
Mm.
Then, as soon as my registration uh, number was out, that's when I started applying.
And this application, is it just was it the recommendation, somebody saying, they want people here apply, or was just a computer search, internet, let me search for jobs, apply for whatever that's interesting to me? How was that process of application, and how long did it take for you to get the first interview and maybe the letter of appointment?
You know, for me, that was again so very interesting, because my thinking at the point was that, oh, yes, I've got my registration, and now I can start experiencing how it's have a feel of the interviews. So that was my
Mm.
thinking. Prepare myself, have a few interviews. If I do not do well in a few, that will propel me to learn my areas of development, and then go on to to perhaps gain some experience, and then find that ideal interview that I will do so well and get the job. it did not work like that, because then what happened was, then I did apply via a recruitment agent. For some reason, I thought that was quicker, so I did that. And so they scheduled an interview for me, and I didn't know that was the only interview that I was going to attend, because then I went through the interview process for a local council job, which is like the Department of Education. It's a government-based job. So I went through the interview, and here I was thinking, oh, I am preparing myself for the interview that is to come.
The practice.
It was the practice, the rehearsal before the actual interview. So
Yeah.
I went through it. It was via Skype, because I was still in South Africa working. I was working at a local high school, and I was also working for the university as a part-time lecturer. So
Wow.
there I was in the comfort of my living room, had the interview. One thing that I realized then during the interview was that there was questions that centered around what I was going to offer, coming from um, a, 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 a dynamic setup that I was coming from.
Wow.
And and for me, that was quite interesting, because often it was me thinking that, oh, I am going to learn these new experiences, embrace that, not realizing that there was also a lot that I was going to offer in terms of what I have learned, how we practice in terms of our practice in South Africa, the way we work, our own inclusivity also, and our own support. So all that, even now, I find that there is quite a lot of things that I offer as well, in as much as I'm learning.
Wow.
So the RES interview turned out to be the actual interview.
Wow.
So, and that's how I got to work where I'm working now.
Wow. So after the interview, how long did it take to get feedback about you being appointed?
It was I was interviewed on a Thursday. I remember this very well. And then I had a waiting period. The interview is very practical in terms of there's a lot that is expected of you, and even after the interview, there is also other assessments that follow, like any interview. The only difference is that it is virtual. So there was a lot of that, and then the interviewers took that away, and then and they did inform me that they would contact me in the coming week. So the agents contacted me in the coming week. And again, it's very important to indicate this. I did not pay the agents any money.
Because I was actually interested in the agent thing. So where do you get them? Who are they?
So again, from Google, and it's very important as well to look at the credentials. I basically looked at recruitment agents specifically for educational psychologists. So
I don't want the Google ones. I need the one that you got. I trust you.
So I went through.
Kindly share yours, and then I can also share.
I went through Pulse Psychological Services. Again, I must put a disclaimer that I'm not advertising for them, but
it's fine. It's fine.
That is the That is a recruitment agency that did all the groundwork for me. So I was not running around applying. They
So
applied for that one
you
and
call them
that
who?
one.
You said it's Pulse who?
Pulse Psychological Services.
Okay. Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
search them and confirm if they're the right one with you.
yeah. No, perfectly well.
No, thanks for
So
sharing that, because I had a question about it on how does one go about it. I know there are a lot of
yeah,
agents, but I wanted to find out which one you
yeah,
use in particular, because there
yeah.
are
I think
nice
yeah,
agents
and I
out there.
think absolutely, and it's also important to know which websites because to look at, especially when exploring such things, because there are some frivolous people out there, and
Mm,
if it is for you that is exploring to work in any country, it's better to go through government websites.
mm,
So for
mm,
example, in UK, the gov.uk will give
mm,
you credible information,
mm,
and it is important, for example, if you apply for work, to see if that employer is registered as well. So
mm,
it's very important to do homework and to
mm,
know the credibility of anything. That's a safety aspect is important, because there are a lot of things that can happen during the
mm,
process, and safety is key.
mm,
um so yes, and going back to what we were talking about,
mm.
um so after having my interviews on a Thursday, the following week on Tuesday, I knew I had got the job.
Wow, wow.
And
Oh, that
it,
must have been exciting. Wow.
it was exciting,
Oh,
shocking, because I was still in
on your
I had
rehearsal mode.
already started my PhD studies.
Oh, wow. So you had just
Yes,
started your PhD by then.
I had not just started, I was in the middle of them.
Wow.
But there was quite a lot that I was juggling, and so it was in my 2017, it was in my third year of PhD studies.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah. So my thinking in my ideal world was that it was this rehearsal interview whilst I was working on uh, finishing my PhD. My
oh,
aim was to to finish my PhD studies, then relocate.
oh, I
But
see. I see.
the narrative did not work as such, because an opportunity had availed itself. So
Wow.
then that meant I had to then juggle PhD,
Mm,
relocating to another continent altogether, which is quite a taxing process, because
mm,
it meant that I could not equally juggle. At some point, I had to put my PhD studies away to
mm,
adjust to a whole new environment, a whole new
mm,
way of working,
mm,
and embracing a new culture altogether.
mm,
And that comes with
mm,
its
mm,
own dynamics and challenges. Just the culture
mm,
shock of being in a different
mm,
country and adjusting
mm,
to it as well,
mm,
is a journey that you
mm,
need to be mentally prepared for.
mm,
So it meant that for my health and well-being, the
mm.
studies had to be put aside for a while whilst
Wow.
I adjusted. Yeah,
And after you got the letter of appointment a week after on Tuesday, how long did
yeah,
it take for you now to relocate? I understand you had to put a notice period, get a visa,
yeah.
but I think you might have had a visa by then.
No, I
What
did not have any visa, because
is it?
how it works is that um, that Tuesday I did not even have the letter of appointment. The letter of appointment followed after. So that was just the
Okay.
initial point of being informed that, oh, you came through. So then it was now a process. Uh, so that was in February of 2018.
Okay.
So from February of 2018, then the place of work where I was going to work, they needed to start facilitating, as then they are the sponsor of work. So they have to make initial applications of the visa of
Oh,
work. So they
okay.
had to do their part. I think
That's
now
good.
that was now a more of a waiting period, which was quite essential,
Mm.
because then it was that time that I was given, as they were working on their part, to say, okay, what is the plan that I need to put in motion? Because then they expected time for me to start was September of 2018.
Okay. That's
Uh,
enough time for you to.
Yes, so it was enough time for me to start re-looking at what do I need to do.
Mm.
I obviously I did not quickly give notice at work, because these things, you do not know what can
True.
happen. You have
True.
not been given a visa at that point,
Mm.
so you cannot start counting your
Mm.
eggs before they hatch. So so
Yeah.
that remains something that was in limbo. But in terms of realizing, oh, there are certain things in terms of how do I need to rearrange my personal life? Are there certain things that I need to already plan and prepare for? I started preparing for that in conviction that I was moving, because I think there's a need and a point where you have to be in that conviction. Otherwise, it will be a train smash at the end. So I then started already decluttering, because I knew there was a move coming forward. And at the same time, I started looking at certain things that I could do with my studies. So because I was doing my PhD, I then informed my supervisor that I was going to leave. So any other field work or data collection that I needed to do, I then did it. And that was really quite helpful and supportive of my research supervisors, because then it meant that it would enable me to work across the globe, and I had all what that I needed to work on with regards to my studies. So that too I had to plan for. So now, then it's a process of, whilst the sponsor, which is the place of work, is doing what it needs to do to get sponsorship or a sponsorship number for you to apply for your visa. You are in that waiting period. So you may need then to probably look at what are the requirements for a visa for you to be here. So and more so for a skilled visa, are there any English tests that you need to do? And fortunately for South Africa, our one of our main medium of instruction is English. So it puts us in a good position whereby you can, as well as SAQA, there's also a board that can evaluate your certificates, called NARIC. So you can easily send your certificates whilst you're waiting, because when you look at the type of visa, which is the skilled work visa, yeah, you will notice that those are some of the requirements that you need to evidence. So whilst I was waiting for them to do their part, I was already gathering up things that I needed to put forward for my visa. So I sent my certificates for evaluation. I did not need to do an English test, because I had always been learning in English. So they came back from evaluation. Again, I think it took a number of weeks and it was back. So I was getting myself ready, knowing that as soon as anything comes back from my employer and the agent, I needed to set my foot forward in terms of what was required there. So everything was ready, and it took like any other process. It took the expected time for me lapsed because um, there were delays. But eventually, as soon as the right documentation came through, I then went on to do the visa application. Um, Again, also, then it is also important to look at if you have dependents or family, to also look at what is also required, because they other than the work itself sponsoring, you also need to evidence that you can afford to make the move, and that is very crucial. So it's a matter of, say, looking at your finances. Can you afford a transition financially? There's need to evidence that. Are there certain things that you need to already start, whether property you need to start selling or reserving to ensure that someone looks after it? All that is critical as you plan ahead. So that was also critical, and looking into okay, what does it mean in terms of if you have a child when they cross over? What is the education system going to be like? Then my son was in primary school, and then when I was researching through, I realized that he was going to have a significant jump from primary, where he was in grade 6, going, when he crossed over, he had graduated to secondary school, and not just secondary school, he was in year 8 of his secondary school. So all those are significant transitions that you need to look through, and what impact will it have on any other people that you will be going or transitioning with.
Wow. No, thank you so much. I see time is
Yeah,
already ahead of us, and we
that's
really
all
need to
right.
wrap up. I'm sure you also need to go. I
That's
think what I
right.
do, I will really request we make some time for a follow up. I haven't even spoken about your
Yeah,
PhD.
yeah.
Congrats on that. I wanted to touch on
Oh,
that,
thank you.
but maybe let's close with this. How's the work
Yeah.
that side compared to this side? And will you recommend anybody to make the same move who are interested? What will you advise them? And what does the work entail compared to the work that we're doing this side? Maybe we can just close on that. And
Okay.
one day, God giving us the grace, we'll do a follow up and touch on other things that we might have missed out.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Uh, Thank you. With regards to work, I must say that the one thing that I found for me from the time that I set foot here and I've started working in the capacity of an educational psychologist, because one important thing, you can come here and work as a lecturer, you can come here and work in different fields. So I worked specifically within the educational setting. um, uh, the work here, in a way, the previous experience that I had in South Africa was quite essential in terms of preparing me in aspects of assessments, in aspects of intervention, in aspects of therapeutic supports. All those key aspects, and also just the training itself of masters and even honors prepared me to be the educational psychologist that I am today. What was quite clear was that dynamic assessment is dynamic assessment, cognitive assessment is cognitive assessment. CBT, whether you go across any globe, it remains cognitive behavioral therapy, and those are universal sets of skills. So whether you are presented with another cognitive assessment, which is not the S size or J size, you have skills and knowledge of how to administer a test, because in your university years you went through assessments, you went through the clinic, so nothing differs that much because the foundational skills are the same. The difference came in terms of approach. So the approach to an assessment, a standardized test, I must say, remains standardized in the way that, in essence of standardized. The one thing again that remains the same when looking back in the time of training and the and clinical assessments was that that formulation of a hypothesis is critical in terms of if you have a young person or child that needs to be supported. And again, in terms of working in a multi-agency way, that you know that you will come in as an educational psychologist, you will work collaboratively with speech and language, with occupational therapists. So the inclusivity bit was quite an eye-opener in terms of how you can work with other professionals and how you merge together and support the child, and then corroborate all that you have found to write a documentation that supports a child. So there was a difference in terms of the culture of working. What does inclusivity mean in terms of way of working? And also the ways of doing work that is meant to be intervention, and also realizing again that there is certain work that we do, for example, that is not just for intervention but as well for preventative work. So we are doing reading workshops, we are doing training on that, emotion coaching, supporting professionals within the school in the form of training. Another significance that I saw in terms of work is that there is already professionals within the school that are working with children, and they are quite key and fundamental in providing the support and supporting the child more on a direct basis than an educational psychologist coming through and directly working with the child to the point of intervention. So what was key in learning was that as a psychologist, then I'm more of a consultant than the person that comes in and works directly with the child, because they are or young people, they are people within a school setting that has already formed a basis of a trusted relationship. So it is about also enabling those professionals to support the child as they should, than me coming in and trying to form a relationship, and probably at the end of the day I walk away. So it's about enabling the systems to facilitate and support. as they should. So that was key and interesting and difference in the way of working, where a psychologist does the assessment and goes on to do the intervention, and the child goes back into the school setting or is still within the school setting. So I found that quite key and interesting to say the people rightly placed in schools, perhaps they need to be enabled with those skills so that they can not only facilitate support for this specific child, but for other children. So that was such an eye-opener in difference and also in the availability of resources. Both human resources and resources that we have in schools. Another eye opener was that in formulating a hypothesis, it meant that specifically in terms of assessments, I did not need to make a child go through a whole range or battery of assessments to assess a specific thing that I needed to assess. I know that in my hypothesis, the child has social and emotional needs. Why do I need to go and do a cognitive assessment? Because that's not the requirement. So I will zone into what they need to be assessed for. If it does give me aspects of their cognitive capacity, yes, I would definitely indicate on that. So that aspect of zeroing in on their areas of need was quite interesting. So now I'm not governed by the standardized test, I'm governed by the need of the child. So then the assessment or dynamic assessment or therapeutic assessment just becomes a tool of getting to know the areas of need of a child. Another important aspect that I realized just by the virtue of setup way of doing is the systematic approach to work. And that was one way of being fully immersed into the world of work, whereby everything is meticulously planned. So you in terms of managing your own work diary and planning on a long-term basis, having worked in a school where there is, for example, 1,000 and something children, and knowing that perhaps I would have about, 4 to 6 cases of support, but sometimes due to crisis, I might not be able to attend to them because I have to do crisis intervention and support. In the setup I'm currently working, you meticulously plan your day and what you are going to do, and some plans can be even 3 to 4 months ahead. So that aspect of being very structured, planning way in advance of what you're going to do, because currently I have about quite a number of schools under me, as well as different capacities of work. So I have training, I have assessments, I have also other professionals within schools that I supervise in terms of their professional development. So all these facets of work need me to clearly plan. You will know beforehand that I have a certain number of trainings that I need to do this year. So as soon as all that information comes in, you plan, you book dates, you set up, and your calendar should be quite functional. So again, being also technologically at a place a bit more advanced. So your diary of work is shared by everyone, and you need to highlight what you are doing. The beauty of it is that you are responsible for your time. There is quite an agility to how you work, which was quite beautiful. So you are responsible for that. The expectation for you to deliver is key. So you do work hard, I must say, and like in any work fraternity, whether it's South Africa or UK, it is important to work smart, because as time goes on, you have to work smart, use your time efficiently, being able to realize and prioritize. So again, what is priority? What is key? Uh, Achieving those goals that you need to achieve. There's quite a lot of administrative work that needs to be done because of our nature of work. So again, being meticulous in planning even administrative work is quite important. And at the same time, also self-care, because we are busy within a helping profession. It is also important to have that self-care. Um, in our workplace, you do have supervisors, but it is also important to ensure that there is that bit of that mental health balance and self-care for one. I don't know if there's anything
Thank
that
you.
I have not touched on.
Look, you have been very elaborate, and I think you have touched on almost everything that I wanted to touch on. And I'm very excited. I think the system there is very interesting. I'm very fascinated by their inclusive approach to their support to learners, particularly the focused assessment that is informed by the needs of the child. I think we speak more about it this side, but I think you guys are more extensive about how you approach it and apply it in practice. And also, I
Mhm.
think your multidisciplinary approach, I think I had a conversation with you, and the way you have explained it, I think is something that we still desire to get to. So thank you so
Mhm.
much. Thank you for that. I think it's very helpful to anybody who wanted a background of the context and the work that you do that side, to also frame their mind and be able to assess if it's something that they might be ready for. And thank you for being so generous with your time. I know I must release you. I found you before you go to work. So
That's all
thank you so
right.
much. I really,
You are
really
most
appreciate
welcome.
any conclusive words on your side before I close?
Thank you so much. I hope it would be, I hope that, what we have discussed will be of fundamental benefit, not just for considering working across the globe, but even in terms of uh, what is it that I need to do to be the best psychologist? Because I think we are agencies of change that are well placed in terms of working with uh, specific people that need to be our support, or just need to be enabled by us. So I I truly hope, perhaps it can even open conversations on what is it that we are currently doing within a South African context or an African context that is quite relevant to us. What are things that we need to add on in terms of experience or changing our ways of working, and at the same time, also for those that are curious to say, what experience or working across the globe, as we have become a global village, which village can I go and work in and gain experience, and develop my skills in terms of supporting uh, young people and families. That is my ultimate hope in this discourse of engagement.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I totally agree. I think this will really help the people because you need somebody who's there who has got a lived experience to be able to share with others are still aspiring to follow the same channel. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions, so don't be surprised if I put WhatsApp and for clarity for people who might have other follow-up questions to the interview.
Okay.
But other than that, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'm still going to follow up for our second interview. I want to hear about practice life in there if you want to open your practice. I want to hear about your PhD journey for those aspiring to do PhD. Even though they're psychologists, is it worth it? And do we have to do it? And what was the experience? And all. I still want to get into that. But other than that, thank you so much. And
thank you so much, and thank you for this privileged opportunity to just share my experiences with those that will find it helpful.
Thank you. Friends, this is Dr. Chambati. So I thank her for all the experience that he has in psychology that he has shared with us and opening up so that he can help you if you want to transition and take another career alternative path that you want to explore. I think she has shared more than we actually asked for. So thank you, Doc. We will meet again.
Okay. Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Friends, thank you so much. I trust that you have enjoyed that interview with Dr. Cleopatra Chambati from the UK. She's an educational psychologist working in the UK. She was in South Africa. She graduated from the University of Pretoria. I know some of you might have a lot of questions that you still wanted to ask. So feel free that you've got a question, you put it on the comments below this video. If there are any comments that you have on how this interview has helped you, please also leave those comments below this video. And I want to encourage those who have not yet subscribed to this channel to make sure that you click on the subscribe button at the bottom of this video. Subscribe so that we can be able to share the weight, and click the bell function as well so that we can be able to get a notification every time we put out a video. And share this video with as many people as possible who might be desiring to relocate and work in other parts of the world. I think we've heard a lot about the process that can help other people. I thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for making sure that you join us to listen to this video with Dr. Chambati from the UK. Enjoy the rest of the day and keep well, and may God bless you.